All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We may have some coming in as I start the kickoff to today's WOW session, but I want to be mindful of everybody's time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. We are so excited for you to hear our awesome presentation as we get started on this Friday morning. I'm Erin Miley. I'm one of the business managers here at AIM, and I am excited to get started. We have a couple of housekeeping items for you today. This is a webinar format, so you can hear and see us, but we cannot hear or see you. So how will you interact with us today? Well, that will be with the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. If you do not readily see the chat icon at the bottom, go ahead and see if you see that more function. It is a circle with three dots. You'll click that and see the chat icon there. If you have any questions for us today, if you have any feedback, you want to comment, you want to express yourself, go ahead and chat that in there. We will be monitoring. Found it. Awesome, Keith. Nice to see you. Go ahead and shout it out. Say hi. We will be interacting with you there today. Good morning, Julie. Awesome. So it sounds like we found the chat. Cool. So that will be how you interact with the presenter and myself today. We will be looking out for any questions there. That is amazing. So without further ado, that's the little housekeeping that I have because I want to leave the bulk of the time today to go over all of the content that we have to talk about today. And I want to introduce back for, I think, the second time this year because she's an awesome presenter and really like the expert on AI. I would say she is an expert on this. We have Lauren Patel, our engagement manager here at AIM, coming back for the second time this year on our WOW session to talk about AI with us. So Lauren, why don't you go ahead and get us started for today?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. If I've seen you, I've seen some of you in the roundtables already this month, so nice to see you again. We have kind of a continuation from our roundtables, but even if you weren't a part of those, this is still a great kind of inclusive conversation. And today we are really focusing on where AI is showing up in your recruiting applicant tracking systems, maybe HRIS, that you may or may not have been aware of and how that is impacting things. So we have a few, we're going to trade back and forth. You'll hear both Erin and I give some information as we go through, but here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about where AI might be living in your systems. We have some examples of what that might be. We're going to talk a little bit about the compliance and the bias risks of that AI that you may or may not know exists. We're going to also give you a list of questions to ask your vendors regarding where AI is showing up in their systems. If they can't answer them, we might need to do some considerations there. And ultimately, just giving you some best practices on how you can design things for balance. AI is here. AI is way in deeper than we maybe even realize, and it is only going to increase its availability, its use, how different organizations and technologies are using it. But it is very important for us as people who make people decisions to be thoughtful and in the know about how it is being used. So, to frame our conversation today, I want to talk a little bit about a lawsuit, which is rare for me to talk about. I'm not Bert Garland, our friend over at Ogletree Deacons, but I think that this will help us to center our conversation. So, I stumbled across this as I was listening to Spotify on a drive home earlier this year, and this podcast clip came up from a podcast publication, and it talked about how unfair like hiring practices, and obviously since I'm in this space, I was very interested. So I took a little listen, and I've been sort of following this case since. The case is Mobley versus Workday. So let me give you the background. Derek Mobley had a really strong IT background and he was laid off in 2017. He spent 2 years applying to over 100+ jobs and got zero callbacks. I would be devastated if that was me. So after a while, he started to kind of put the pieces together. He was noticing that rejection emails were coming in the middle of the night. It was very clear from the formatting that they were automated, which for the record, I'm not opposed to automations, but he was starting to wonder, why am I getting rejected from everything? Then he noticed, Almost every single thing he was applying to was using Workday as their applicant tracking system. So he started to question, was this inferring race from the school that he attended? Was it inferring age from his graduation dates? Did it pick up on his disability that he had somewhere in this mix? So, what he kind of came and brought this case to was, is the tool screening me out from things that the AI, the technology, is inferring based on my information? So he came to the courts. The courts have said, yes, we will allow this case to continue based on the evidence that we see, but only on an age discrimination claim. And what they're really saying is this is a landmark case because it's not the individual going after the employer and say, you're discriminating, you didn't hire me. It's the technology. It is the applicant tracking system that Workday has set up. Workday is saying, of course, we don't make the decisions, the users do, the employers are setting all of the controls. But what the judge is coming back and saying is that this technology is acting as an agent on behalf of the employer. So this is something that I found really interesting from an AI perspective, from an HR perspective, but also with the current state of our DEI kind of moving away, but we also have to be aware of bias. I think it was a really eye-opening moment for me to say, AI is in places that we don't even know where it's at. If you currently have Workday, I don't want you to go press the panic button. It's okay. We're going to talk about it. But a big part of today's discussion is helping to sort of peel back the curtain on where AI might be situated that you're not aware of. So, in just a second, I'm going to turn it over to Erin. She's going to start that conversation of where AI shows up, and we're going to go through a few things. Last thing on this is still open in the courts. It was opened in 2023. They are still working through that. So follow along the case if you're interested. But I think this will be something that as employers, we're going to need to pay attention to so that we know the court's ruling on it. But I'm going to turn this over to Erin, and she's going to start walking us through where AI is showing up in our technological processes of hiring.
All right, awesome. So we're gonna get into the techie side. And I might geek out over something, so bear with me because I kind of get excited about the tech side of things, which is weird because I'm an art history major, so who knew? All right, so where does AI show up in our tech? So the most notable, and I think the most easiest way for a lot of us and what we've seen is the sourcing and matching. So that's your candidate sourcing, where AI goes out and proactively recommends you candidates, or they go out and you match it in your systems, who's good for a fit for the role. It goes to an intelligent matching, meaning it goes beyond keyword search matching and it goes in and does a deeper dive into your resumes, and it finds considering factors into your experiences and your educations and your things like that. So it does more of an intelligent match. So and like more of a cultural fit based on what your job description says is part of your organization culture, because you should be having that in your job ads. Um, so it's more of your sourcing and matching. So that's AI helping you in that space. And I think that's what we are used to at this point and understand at this point. So another factor that plays in is your task automation and efficiency. So the top bullet point there, job description creation. If we're not having AI help us with that at this point, are we living under rocks? I don't know if you've had conversations with me or Lauren in the past year or more at this point. We've already recommended this to you. The resume screening, the shortlisting, that's a little bit of a holdover from that sourcing and matching. That kind of plays into it. That's that creating efficiency. It's like your HR assistant, just doing an initial review of your resumes. Candidate tanking, I think that might be a typo. Candidate ranking maybe should have been the word. But it's just more of a way of doing an initial pass through and saying, here's who I'm looking at first, second, third. So it's doing efficiencies for you. it's just automating some of those minutia, those things that you spend so much time doing. It's creating those efficiencies and automation saying, hey, I spend so much time typing the same email over and over and over again to phone screen somebody, like to request phone screenings. Like, why am I doing that? It's taking those things that you would do for every single candidate to make it individualized and saying, I'm going to take that off your plate and
I
automating it.
If I can interject for just a second,
Mhm.
I think where we're already starting to see, and maybe you guys are picking this up a little bit, is there is a difference between the generative AI, like a Chat GPT, an Amy Hart, a Copilot, where you're asking it to help you with content creation. That's generative AI. You guys are very aware of when you're doing it or when you're not doing it.
Mhm.
That's a little bit less of what we're talking about today. More of what we're talking about today is the stuff that is built into the systems that you may not be actively choosing, right? I'm choosing to write a job ad with ChatGPT or Amy Hart's help. I'm not necessarily choosing how it's sorting or sourcing. I'm not going in and messing with the LinkedIn algorithm in the recruiter view, right? So there is a difference there. AI is very much on a spectrum. So as we go through, just kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah. So some of these you will have a knowledge of because you'll have had a hand in because the generative part. Some of these you'll be aware of because you see it and you interact with it, but you won't have a part in setting it up because it's the system doing it for you. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a couple more slides. The next piece here is data-driven insights and bias reduction. This is the behind the scenes that you aren't seeing. This is the things that does the analysis, does the reporting, let me think about this and make recommendations for you, and does all of that. Hey, here's your rankings. Here's who we think are the fits. Here's who we think is the top candidate. Here's who we don't think are good fits, and we're going to weed them out for you. That's the insight kind of portion, and that's where the Workday situation ends up happening, and that's where these systems have to have efficiencies behind the scenes to audit themselves and have appropriate processes in place and setup in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. Um, so when we think about that piece, that's the piece, the behind the things that we don't know if our systems are using or not using, but they are helpful to us because when it comes to our reporting out of our system, we need the AI to help us sometimes catch trends. Like, hey, all of my candidates are coming in the door with like the same type of resume. Like, why are they doing that? Well, it's an AI bot, maybe helping them write the resumes. And that's a trend nowadays. Lauren has talked about it. There are tons of different, websites where AI bots help them apply to roles and they create, resumes for them. So it can help spot trends for you. It can help say, all my candidates have this type of background. Why is that? And they're not successful in the role. Maybe I need a different way of approaching my candidate pool moving forward when I post the job again. Like it can help you spot all those different types of trends. That's where this is helpful. And this is why we want this AI in our systems. And this is super great. Just need to be careful. And then the candidate experience and engagement. AI is a great tool when enhancing that engagement because we ghost our candidates. You're lying if you say you don't. If you say you send out that final notification saying you've not been selected, thank you, but no thank you. If you do that for every single one of your candidates, you lie sometimes, you lie. This helps create that engagement and that lasting touch point with them that makes them want to reapply in the future if you did not hire them. It keeps them coming back and engaged in the hiring process the longer that interview process runs. So it creates that personalized communication. It's not that impersonal, sincerely HR department kind of email communication. It's going to help create an experience for you that otherwise you would not be able to do if you have 100 candidates for an IT position, which I have seen come through systems. I had a client with 400 candidates once, and they're like, I can't manage this. So it's going to help manage those and make it personalized, because AI can help you. And it can help you with your interviews to an extent if done appropriately. Because I know we're a little hesitant nowadays. So it's really behind the scenes, can do a lot of work and a lot of heavy lifting and create a great experience on both ends when everyone's aware of the process and everyone does it in a very transparent way. So that's where AI shows up. Fantastic, and we love it. If we want to go ahead and go to the next slide. All right. This is what I love to call a little bit of a deeper dive into like seeing what I like what I call passive recruiting. And I use the words assertive recruiting because I'm not an assertive person, so I don't usually go out and go to people. But it's actually active recruiting. Because I know some people don't like the word assertive. So there's passive recruiting and active recruiting, and AI shows up in both of them. And when you yourself want to utilize it, this is where I would say this comes into play most. So passive recruiting is when you go into your ATS systems and you say, I want to go ahead and post this position, and I'm going to use my generative AI to help me write the ad and post it, send it out. It's going to grab my candidates, it's going to do the matching scores, and I'm going to do all those things. It's a set it and forget it, and I'm off and doing my rest of my HR role. It frees recruiters to focus on other things and other things, like other areas. It's great. You set it and forget it. Active recruiting is more of the Indeed smart sourcing. It's more your LinkedIn recruiter seats. It's the AI built into those functionalities where it's recommending candidates because it's that intelligent matching. That's where that's coming into play. It enables you to create engagement and communications matched to those matches so that it's saying, hey, this person's a match to you. We recommend them to you. And here's some possible communications that you might want to send out to them. Would you like to trigger them? That would be that intelligent communication channel with the AI built in. So it's more of AI is doing all this thinking for you, and you just have to trigger it with a couple of clicks. It's more of the active recruiting side. Now, there are systems that have that built in, but if you are going outside of a system, you're not gonna have the AI in the active recruiting. So if you're going out into the communities, which some of you are, that's great. You can have your chat GPTs and things like that help you generate those kind of communications. It's just a little less automated. Um, so just think about it as like if you have LinkedIn recruiter seats, if you are paying for those Indeed smart sourcings, I think Indeed is launching something called Indeed Connect for if you're a larger organization or a staffing recruiting organization. They're launching something in 2026 at the beginning of the year that will be more like that active recruiting scenario. So think about it that way. It's the going out into the world, and it actually will be kind of cool to see what produces from that. All right, let's go to the next one. So let's talk about where it shows up. And we picked four really large technologies, platforms to kind of look at today. They're not ranked in any order placement here of like, hey, we love this one the best versus the worst. And yes, we are putting ourselves into the mix. We are number 5 on here. And we're going to talk about that last. This is not in any order though. We just picked these as these are popular sites that people use and their examples. And yes, Workday is on here. So where does AI show up? And of these 4 systems, you're gonna start seeing a pattern because they all use very similar technologies when it comes to AI. I did a little deeper dive, and I'm going to tell you they all use the same AI and they all just name it differently. Workday actually uses candidate matching, score matching, only they give it a letter of the alphabet. It's A, B, A, B, C, D. So if you're an A, you're the best fit. If you're a D, you're probably not a great fit, which was an interesting way to score people. I didn't really love that, but that was just my personal opinion. They have something like a resume analysis, so it scans and extracts data. They have candidate ranking, predictive analytics, so analyzing past hiring data and performance of successful employees, so that the AI can predict which new candidates are likely to be a good long-term fit, which was an interesting kind of concept. Liked that. That's if you're using their full HRIS though, and not just the recruiting piece. So that's an outlay of money. Um, they have the automated filtering. So the AI automatically filters out candidates who do not meet the core criteria for your company, saving recruiters time on manual review. Didn't love that because that's making the AI an employer decision for you. That means there's a heavy burden on the employer. So that has the heavy burden on the employer to do audits on a regular basis of that system to ensure that it meets your criteria as an employer. So be mindful of that. ADP, very similar. So they have relevancy, what they call relevancy scoring. So AI compares and extracts data to the requirements of the job. It's very much like a candidate ranking. Weighted in some scores for their relevancy score, more like a percentage though. It's not an A, B, C, D. They do ranking and filtering. They have something that's bias mitigation though. The AI is designed and trained to be trained on skill-based data rather than protected demographic information, which helps reduce human bias in the initial screening stage. I thought that was an interesting concept from them. And they prioritize candidates for recruiters on the relevancy scores to guide them and help them prioritize, which again, same thing a lot of the systems will do. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to the next systems. UKG and ISIMs, very similar. Again, they do candidate scoring and ranking. UKG has an interesting one. They do a intelligent communication. So they have AI chatbots that can handle initial candidate communications and interactions by answering frequently asked questions by the candidates. That one was interesting. I thought that was a cool feature that they had, and some systems can send out automated reminders and nudges to the candidates, although a lot of systems have that built into application processes. They offer talent insights beyond the initial screening. Thought that was cool. And they review and makes final decisions. So the AI presents a list of top candidates, but the final decisions are still remaining with the AI recruiter or the recruiters for the individual to move forward. AI enhances, but does not replace the recruiter's judgment. They make that note on their website, which I thought that was interesting. And then ISIMs. Now, ISIMs, in my opinion, out of all four of these, was the most interesting one. They have the talent AI, the talent cloud AI. And if I were to pick one of these systems, they were probably the best, in my opinion, just because of the way that the language that they used, if just off pure glancing and not actually doing a deeper dive. They do the candidate and job matching, all of them do. They have a prioritized candidate list based on ranking, with the strongest matches at the top, helping recruiters quickly prioritize. Bias reduction focuses on skills, experience, certifications, reduces human bias by ensuring more objective evaluation of candidate. Continuous learning. So the AI can learn from decisions that the recruiters make, even if they differ from the AI's recommendations, to refine for future suggestions from similar roles. I like that because if the recruiter makes a decision because the person's like a non-linear traditional path, Lauren likes to talk about this. She's not traditional to the path that she has a musical theater background. She's not traditional to the roles that she typically will take. If a recruiter takes that type of person into a role, they note it in the system and the system learns from that. They're learning that skill sets are not always the same for what the description might say. So it's learning that from that. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about the systems that we kind of benchmarked against. So if we look at what AIM offers, because this one I can actually show. All right. So if you want to see a little bit of like some screenshots of what it looks like in play, if you haven't seen what it looks like if you are curious of a system that has it available. Um, this is what candidate scoring looks like. So our system in particular has job ad writing and candidate scoring. That is what we have in our system. And that is all we offer. And I was very careful when I brought it to our membership because I was like, I heard about the Workdays. I've heard about the big systems. And I'm like, I am very careful about how our employers are very mindful of compliance and law. So I was very careful about it. It does candidate scoring. It does that initial review. It matches based on the job related information and what the candidate has supplied. It gives you a red, yellow, green situation. Green being, hey, this is your best fits. Your yellows are, hey, maybe these are your middle tier, and red are maybe your lowest tier to look at. It's ranking your system basically. It's your HR assistant doing your initial reviews and saying, hey, here's my candidates I would put forth first for you. Here's your second review and your third review. It does not auto disposition anybody out. You're still all looking at all the candidates, but it's just saying, here's your focus, second and third. And then it's giving you, here are their top skills, their great skills, their stellar skills that match your job. Here are their skills to grow, and here's where your conversation happens. Because the skills to grow are going to tell you, can I get them there faster? Can I get them slow? Like, are they not going to get there where I need them to be in a timely fashion? Conversation happens here. So I really like that. And our system also does the feedback option where you can learn from it. So if you really liked this candidate, they were the fit for your organization, you give it a feedback about it. If they weren't, you give it feedback and why they weren't a fit, because maybe they ranked higher. So ours has that learning capability as well. And that's what I really like. Now, I would be remiss if I said our system didn't have like flaws. Every system that I've talked about today has those flaws. So while it's an amazing tool, AI is always going to be an amazing tool. It's designed to create efficiencies for you as a recruiter. Every one of these features that I've talked about for any of these systems is designed to help you as a recruiter. But clients should always use caution when making judgments. They need to see the whole picture. You need to still make the determination yourself and not let the AI make the decision for your organization, because that is where you as an employer can get in trouble. Because the definition, and I had this conversation last week on my webinar for background best practices, the definition of an employer is changing. It is expanding to include your vendors and your CRAs, your agents, whoever you are partnering with. The definition of an employer is changing to not only include you, it is including your other people in the process. So when we think about that, if AI is making the decision and that AI is driven by your system, that system is now a partner and another agent for you as an employer. So just think about that and how we interact. Okay.
I think to your point, Erin, like that is the real life change that we're seeing from things like the Mobley versus Workday, right? The judge was saying, well, it's acting as an agent on like as a part of the employer on behalf of the employer. And now that definition is expanding further. Before I transition over and we kind of talk about these three areas, really where if we were to summarize it and group it in of where AI is showing up, I want to take a second and tie in some of our conversations from the roundtables this week. So, and well, actually, over the past couple of weeks. So we talked a lot about how to rethink things like keywords in our job ads, keywords to not only be attractive to a human candidate about what the job is and what they're going to do, but also keywords to ensure that the job is found. For instance, if I'm hiring for a customer service job, I need to have customer service and correlating keywords a few times in that job ad. But when we're talking about the scoring portions, or maybe it's the sorting out of candidates, the tiering of candidates, the systems are looking for keywords as well. And it may not exclusively be keywords because they are models that can understand sentiments. They can understand, subtext even, if you will. But what they are really trying to do is to align what candidates say with what you're asking for. Now, if you guys have joined me on other AI things, you've seen how very simple it is for me as a candidate to make my resume, my application reflect exactly what the employer is asking for. Back to Erin's point, I've had a nonlinear path, right? I've been in leadership, I've been in retail, I've been in marketing, I've built websites, I've trained salespeople, I've trained marketing people, I've led sales departments, I've been a salesperson. I can do a lot of roles and I can take my experience and customize it to whatever I'm applying for with ease and efficiency. So when we're talking about that, you could have the same candidate, perhaps I'm being hypothetical here, but you could have the same candidate apply for different roles and be a great match for multiple roles just because of how they can customize things with the help of AI. We've always encouraged people to customize their resume for the job or for the employer. Well, they're doing it. They're doing it en masse with the help of AI and incredible efficiency. So, one of the things that I've been sharing with people over the past couple of months is we used to screen for polish, right? We're looking for typos. We're looking for do your sentences make sense or is it just word salad? Like what are we actually getting through? What I would suggest is to start transitioning away from polish and into proof. Right? It's very easy for AI to build a polished resume, a polished application, but proof is something that they're going to have to bring to the table and it can be substantiated. We recently have hired a candidate and I love that he had metrics on his resume. I was so excited to have a chat with him because I'm like, yes, it's proof, right? That brought something different to the table than just I've done a great job in all of my jobs of the past. So remember when it's getting into the scoring portions, that's what it's looking for. And I think to Erin's point, like that's where part of the risk is lying, right? If somebody does not have a linear path, they may be pushed out. If someone is just really good at making it match your qualifications, they could be put in. People who could be great fits for other reasons can be filtered out by AI depending on a few factors. So let me transition and talk a little bit about those factors. So we've got basically three risk zones. And I have a few stories I want to share. And literally, I have a piece of paper right here from an article that Erin shared with me yesterday from CCH Answers, a membership resource that you guys have. If you don't get their daily emails, go into your member dashboard, go to CCH Answers, sign up for those emails because this has some great stuff in there and I'm gonna read a couple of them to you. But as we're seeing, AI is involved in multiple phases of our recruitment process. But I want to share with you a few things. So, one of them, there was a recent study done by the University of Washington that found that three large language models, LLMs, AIs, generative AIs, were used to rank real applicant resumes. They had over 500 job listings, and there were 120 first names manipulated across gender and race. And what was interesting was the results came back and it showed that they favored white associated names 85% of the time versus black associated names 9% of the time. And male names, male associated names scored 52% of the time versus female associated names at 11% of the time. So when we are talking about bias, the whole concept was, well, if humans aren't making the decisions and machines are making the decisions, bias is just going to go away. There's not a worry about this anymore. Wrong. Our systems are trained by the people who design them. So anything that we are putting in intentionally or unintentionally are affecting these things. So, the three risk zones that we're really seeing this show up in, the first is the data bias. So, When we're talking about data, this almost brings me back to assessments because we've been chatting about these in the roundtables over the past couple weeks. We've talked about, okay, you're hiring for this role. Think about who's been really successful in that role. If I go back to my applicant tracking system and say, this is someone who's been successful in this role, find candidates with these type of qualities, the information that I am putting into my system and saying, it just so happens that I've only had females in this role or only had, this type of person in this role. That is changing and altering how you're and influencing how your AI is making decisions. So the data that you are putting in, again, intentionally, unintentionally, it can just so happen that everybody in the role happens to be a dude. It could be that way, right? But that will influence how the AI interacts. So, things to keep in mind: historical hiring has favored certain groups, and AI can learn it. It can reflect human bias in the past. So, some things that you need to do, and we're going to get to the questions to ask your vendors, but you really need to ask yourself, who trained this? When did they train it? And on what samples was it trained on? So if I've put information in, what am I putting into the system? The second thing is the algorithm risk. I don't know about you, and we'll put it into something that's not AI, it's a little less scary. I have no idea how Excel works. I truly don't. Like when I go to the formula box, I'm picking the one that it works, but how it got to that point, I have no idea. And we've never really said, oh, there could be risk in how Excel is analyzing something, right? But there is a little bit of algorithmic risk when it comes to AI. How it is processing things can be a little bit concerning. So this is kind of like that black box stuff that we don't really know. So things to keep in mind. Models may rank or score candidates without transparency. Transparency is, when we get into compliance in just a minute, that is really where the concern is. You've got to know what's going on. I know a lot of us are going 100 miles an hour, maybe with, 100% speed and 80% accuracy. When we are optimizing for speed to hire, it can accidentally equal the same as before. So to Erin's point, if you're constantly hiring the same types of people or putting in the same qualifications because that's just what you've done, it may not be what you need to be doing. And there can be hidden weighting, years of uninterrupted employment. We often talk about this, right? Like they haven't had a gap in their resume. That could be skewing outcomes. So, what you need to start asking is, what variables matter most and how often are we reevaluating them? Which brings me to this last risk factor, and that is really the process risk, and that is our human blind spots. I don't believe that anyone on this call today is totally letting AI make all of their decisions because you are smart people who are involved in the process. We're seeing hiring managers getting more involved in the process, but many of us are using AI, which is great, but we still have to be involved and we do have to actively question what AI is doing. So, please don't allow yourself to be over reliant on the scorings. It is a nice thing to do, but to Erin's point, we don't want any candidates being totally excluded, kind of put in like think of it like your junk mail folder in your email, right? We don't want that filtering to happen. We want you to still be able to see all of the candidates that are coming through and make sure that what the AI or the systems or the technologies are doing is still in alignment with the company's needs and with the values. So we do need to make sure that humans are still very much a part of the process here, because missing oversight or not doing audits can really be a compliance exposure. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Erin, before I move on to compliance, any additional thoughts to add?
Yes. So this actually, I have a great example because it actually happened with a member just over a couple months ago. Don't confuse AI with the components of a system that you actually control. And what I mean by this is in AIM track, you can set up job related questions or disqualifier questions or what we call knockout questions. These are things that you control, and other ATSs offer these. These are things that you often set it and forget it because they are things that you tie to a job. And if you don't post for the job often or frequently, you don't remember that you have these pre-done set of questions where you have set up a question that says, do you have XYZ certification for this role? Yes or no? And if you've checked no as your disqualifier, you are now putting anyone who has responded in that way into your disqualified applicant pool. And typically in most systems, those people go into a separate set of people or a separate set of your section or system, and you don't see them. They are in out of sight and they are disqualified from your applicant pool. Um, that happened to a member just a couple of months ago when she applied to a member company for their HR director position. Now she managed to still get the role because she had untraditional methods of getting into the interviewing process. But when she got in the door and she got me on the phone, she's like, oh, they said AI disqualified me. I'm like, well, your company's not using AI in our system because you have to have a conversation with me in order to have that turned on. What do you mean? They're like, well, I got disqualified out of the role. And I'm like, well, that's because nobody has looked at your job related questions in a while. So if
Mm,
you're not auditing and looking at those are things that you as users have hands on and actually need to, again, review on a regular basis. And this always takes it back to, and I talked about it last week on my call, you need to have a regular process for auditing and reviewing your processes and procedures for updating anything that you do as an organization. And that includes reviewing regularly your job related questions that could disqualify people from a role as well. So just kind of that process in place. That's not AI, that's your process. So kind
mhm.
of considering that.
Yeah, and to that point, Erin, I think it's so easy to just be like, well, AI did it. And that's not AI. We have things like think of like auto bill pay, right? That's not AI. That's something that we have said, yes, take my money out of my account, right? But I think we're going to start to see this kind of bleed over or excused, response because of it. So let me share one of those stats from this article. I'm going to read it straight here. It says, this is from, again, CCH Answers. This was a greenhouse study. It says 35% of job seekers in the US think AI has shifted bias from humans to algorithms. I agree. And close to 1 in 5, 18%, say it's amplified bias by learning from historical patterns. So I do agree. And I think that that is a risk if we are not cautious about it. So let's take just a minute and talk a little bit about compliance. In my AI versus AI session this summer, I talked a little bit about this. Erin just spoke about it a week ago. This is not an all-encompassing and comprehensive list, but these are some states that have put stuff in place or are getting ready to put in stuff in place. And I think based on this list, there's like 20 more that Erin spoke about last week. So check the states that you operate in. But really, where we're at with the compliance piece is states are not waiting for the federal government to put rules in place. They're not waiting for direction. They are doing their own thing. And if I had to summarize where most of the compliance risks are or what they're putting into place, it comes down to what we're talking about today. AI is not supposed to be making hiring, firing people decisions on its own. There has to be human oversight. Processes and AIs have to be audited and it needs to be transparent. One of the things I talked about in that session is it's totally fine to use AI. It's fine to use it in your interviewing. It is fine to use it in your job ads. It's fine to use it even in scoring, right? It's okay to do that, but you have got to be transparent about it. If you are using AI in your process, and I don't mean I use this to help me write my job ad. You don't need to advertise that. That's fine. But if you're using it to work towards helping you make people decisions, you have got to be transparent to your candidates about that. What I am starting to see in those job ads is kind of almost like a disclaimer statement of, we use AI in our process. Here's how we use it. You may get an automated response. You may get someone, an AI agent, asking you for an interview time. You may get a screening by an AI agent. Now, that is totally up to you. I do know we have a member or two who is doing AI interviewing at this point, testing it out. But again, do not let it make those decisions for you, and be transparent. So everything that we're talking about today is helping towards, the general compliance. And even if you or your state does not have something at this point that's firm in the law, be mindful of that and make sure you are doing those things of auditing the process. You're talking to your vendors. You are in the know so that you can make sure that your candidates, your hiring managers, anybody involved in the decision-making process is in the know. And that's where I'm going to let Erin kind of share some of the questions to be asking your vendors, because to her point, they are now a part of you as the employer.
Yeah, and I will sneak in a little thing onto to Lauren's last slide. Also, there is starting to become a big push to having an adverse action process to that portion of the hiring process as well. Not just, if you're familiar with background checks and the adverse action process on a background side, they're starting to push for an adverse action process as it relates to the recruiting side and the hiring decisions there if you're using AI in those decisions as well. So there's a big push starting to happen there. So just kind of be mindful as we see those AI laws being passed, adverse action maybe start to have a tie to that as well. So just wanted to put that in out there into the world, because we love the adverse action. All right, so questions to ask your vendors, because I get questions all the time. So, hey, ask me the questions. These are some great starter questions. If you haven't had a conversation with your vendor lately, as we head into 2026, have a conversation with them, because this is a good time to say, hey, I want to understand the AI in our system better. Maybe you haven't implemented it yet and you're ready to go down that path because you want to make your life a little bit easier. But you want to know what it means first. Go ahead and give them this list of questions. You can, we'll be giving you a copy after today. So you can literally copy and paste these out and give them to them, and they should be able to answer these questions for you. And it's super simple. If you bring these to me, I will either be able to answer these for you. I will type out an answer for you. I may have a guide, depending on the complexity of the question. I may have a guide that I can attach to you. If I cannot answer these, I know who can. And once I get the answer, I will create a guide and I will have it forevermore to disseminate to whoever asks me in the future. Um, I do have this information from my vendor for AimTrack, because I know how the security in the AI works from AimTrack, because they've designed it to comply with the most stringent of the AI laws, which is New York, because they were like, hey, New York has this law. We want to make sure we're going to meet all the needs of whoever has that law in play. So we are very transparent, and your vendors should be very transparent. If they are not creating that transparency and they cannot answer those questions, or at least to the best of their ability, try to answer those questions for you, that should throw up red flags, because they should be bending over backwards trying to help you get those answers. That, to me, if they aren't, just shows they don't either understand their own AI, they are trying to hide something, because their AI is doing something maybe that it shouldn't, um, or some other kind of issue is in play, or they're just not comfortable. So just kind of keep that in mind, those red flags. If you're wanting more questions or different questions, I have a whole other list of questions on my other webinar. I have those as well. I can give those as well for background vendor, specifically if you want those. It just is helpful to have these in place so you can ask the right questions. It is super important, to do that. And I had another thought, but I lost the thought. So we can go and continue on that thought.
I think out of this list, and again, this is not an all-encompassing list, but these are
Mhm.
just some that we would suggest going to your vendors and asking them. And as someone who comes out of sales, your salesperson will probably not be the one to answer these. So whoever you can talk to from a technical perspective, that's where you're going to want to get down to this just to make sure that you're in good shape. But the one that really sticks out to me where I think we're seeing it across systems is in that candidate scoring. So that third question there of can you provide transparency into how candidate scores are calculated? You understanding how Bobby got in as green and Susie is yellow. You need to understand what that is and understanding how often they're looking at these algorithms. I think that's going to be really critical too. Especially because to Erin's point, you're kind of on the hook for what your technology is doing.
Oh,
So ask
yeah.
yourself and your teams these questions too as you are integrating AI into your processes. So if you're thinking, well, we're going to integrate AI into this specific operation, you need to say who's going to be who's going to model this? Who is going to be auditing this? How
Mhm.
are we making these decisions? What parameters are we putting in? That documentation is going to be critical for you if and when something should ever come up, but it's also going to be important because we change roles. Technology is changing so stinking fast, and you need to know where you're coming from, and what would need to be adjusted. Erin, you were going to add something?
I I did remember my thought. During my research of the four systems we talked about, I can't remember which one. It's definitely not Workday. But of the other three, one of them did actually have literally on their website a full 12-page document that talked about all of this.
That's great.
Now, if we talk about one of those systems, if you are looking for a new system and it's not AimTrack, but you should use AimTrack because we want you to use AimTrack. But if you're looking for another system, they are fully transparent, and it was out on their website of a full
Mm-hmm.
12-page document of how they do all of this. And I
Yeah,
was impressed. I'm like,
fantastic.
that was impressive. So if you're looking for a new system that is an aim track, but you should use aim track because we want you to use aim track because we're awesome. Um, check one of those systems out if you're looking for that.
But that's the kind of transparency that you should expect from
Mhm.
all of your vendors, not just your applicant tracking system, but whoever you are using.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right, so let's do a couple of takeaways for today's session and feel free to enter more questions into the chat. I've answered a couple. You can do the chat, you can do the Q&A. Thank you to those who use the Q&A. I was watching that as well. But here would be your takeaways from today. You've got to know what is going on before we even get into this. Like, you've got to know what's going on. So take a look into whatever systems you are using. Maybe start with your applicant tracking system or your HRIS, and then move outward from there. These kind of takeaways here, how we're designing for balance, is going to be critical outside of just applicant tracking, but for almost every AI that you are including into your processes. So you got to know what's going on. Second thing, make sure we are always keeping humans in the loop. Keep them in the loop for those people decisions, and really make sure that they are the ones who are focusing and honing in on what the AIs are doing. Second, you see here audit like it's routine maintenance because the technologies are changing so quickly, because they are intelligent beings, they can make decisions. And sometimes the decisions that they make this week might be different decisions than they make next week based on what you give, based on what you feed it, based on the other decisions it has made, based on the candidate pool that it has to work with. So you really do need to audit often and make sure that we're auditing not only for is it working, but is it biased? Is it giving me my best candidates? Are people going to the do not touch folder that really shouldn't be? And to Erin's point, what is AI and what is just process? The documentation of this is really going to be critical. So make sure you've got a good system to keep up with all of this. The last big takeaway that we have for you is about transparency. Be transparent inside of your companies, be transparent externally, and expect and demand that your vendors are also transparent in how things are working. That's going to be very, very critical from a compliance perspective. You're going to be able to do a lot. AI is only going to increase in our processes, but being transparent will be very important. And that's why I'm going to leave you with this little stat here. 87% of job seekers say it's important for employers to be transparent about their AI use. So, pay transparency, AI transparency, I can all but guarantee we're going to start seeing those trends come into not just being trends or nice to haves, but it's going to come into legislation even further. Yeah. Erin, I will turn it over to you for final questions or anything that we need to wrap up on the session.
Awesome. I don't see any questions in the chat. The chat's been quiet today. Nobody's had their coffee apparently. All right. Well, I will. Thank you, Michelle. Awesome. Well, it looks like there's no questions. So if you guys think of anything after today's conversation, I will be sending out all of this information in an email, as I always do, along with a recording. If you think of anything, please reach out. If you are interested in exploring AIM and its capabilities, I am happy to help out. Please reach out. Thank you, Lauren, for spending time with us today and departing all of your knowledge as always. And this is the last one of the year, y'all. So we will see you again in 2026 for January's WOW session. And until then, have a happy and safe holiday season. And we will see you next year. Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.